وشدة الفتن بنا وتظاهر الزمان علينا، فصل على محمد وآله وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم برحمتك في الصالحين فأدخلنا، وفي عليين فارفعنا، وبكأس من معين من عين سلسبيل فأسقنا، ومن الحور العين برحمتك فزوجنا، ومن الولدان المخلدين كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون فاخدمنا، ومن ثمار الجنة ولحوم الطير فأطعمنا، ومن ثياب السندس والحرير والاستبرق فألبسنا، وليلة القدر وحج بيتك الحرام وقتلا في سبيلك فوفق لنا، وصالح الدعاء والمسألة فاستجب لنا، وإذا جمعت الأولين والآخرين يوم القيامة فارحمنا، وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا، وفي جهنم فلا تغل لنا، وفي عذابك وهوانك فلا تبتلنا، ومن الزقوم والضريع فلا تطعمنا، ومع الشياطين فلا تجعلنا، وفي النار على وجوهنا فلا تكببنا، ومن ثياب النار وسرابيل القطران فلا تلبسنا، ومن كل سوء يا لا إله إلا أنت بحق لا إله إلا أنت فنجنا. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على
أفلح من يصلي على محمد وآل محمد.
It's good. You can turn off the delay. I don't need that. It's the delay or the reverb. You don't have to keep that on. Is it? I think it's on a little bit. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, so we gave this analogy yesterday about identity and Superman, and we were trying to show the same way Superman had a problem with his identity, we have a problem with ours. So what were some of the reasons that both him, Superman, and us, why we have a problem with our Muslim identity? If you remember, what were we talking about yesterday?
How we like wanted to fit in, and like why Superman was scared when he first found out that he had powers.
Yeah, Hasan. Okay. What else?
We usually like forget our origins, kind of like how we forget how our origin like from Allah and stuff. So like how like I think Superman forgot where he was originally, forgot where he was from, but like he realized he wasn't from like Kansas. He realized he was from another planet. So it's kind of like he kind of forgot about that because he was never told about it and like never guided or trained about it at all.
And how does that relate to us? Like, why do we forget that we're from Allah and we have this like great origin? Stop cheating. Sorry, you can cheat a little bit. It's okay. You can help. So same. You're saying Superman, Clark wasn't trained for that stuff. What about us?
Maybe like when we grow up, like being told by our parents.
Yeah. So
that guided by our parents and stuff.
Yeah. So it's how to be parenting. Yeah. Parenting. So the way we've been raised, sometimes we didn't get all the information, all the skills that we needed to have a strong identity. Anybody else remember anything else? Or anything else you remember from yesterday at all that you want to share before we move on? No? Okay. Let's continue then, inshallah. Okay. So we're going to start. Oh boy. Here we go. Oh man. Okay. So what we ended with yesterday too is we were giving some ideas about some of the ways that we can try to get our identity back. So I want to relate it to one of the ayat in the Quran. I believe it's Surah. Let me look it up. Sorry. Yeah, Surah Hashr, Surah 59. I'm going to put it over here. It's ayah 19. So over there, anybody know this? I'll start to say some of it. Maybe some of you know it. You guys are busy eating. You're not going to recite right now. That's fine. They're in another world right now of their own. So in Surah Al-Hashr, Surah 59, Ayah 19, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. What's that? So first is, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ. Allah says, don't be like those who forget or have forgotten about Allah. I said, okay. So I'm going to make it in 3 parts. So part 1 or step 1 is don't forget God or don't forget Allah. Why is every single marker dead? Okay, I gotta switch color. Let's go green. Okay. So first thing, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ. Don't be like those who forgot about Allah, meaning don't forget Allah. Okay? Then, what in the world? Why is this Christmas themed? Alright, something is wrong with your markers. Okay. Yeah, so وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ. So don't forget about Allah. Okay, well, if we get, then what happens? فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Because when that happens, then Allah will make you forget yourself, forget your nafs. Forget yourself, forget your nafs, or in the way that we're phrasing it, you forget your identity. So don't be like those who forgot about Allah, because if you do that, then what's the effect? What's the next step is Allah is going to make you forget who you really are. Hopefully this red is actually red, not some other random color. Oh yes, okay, so red works. And then finally, Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Did you guys know what is a fasiq? Yeah. You raised your hand and told me you don't. Thank you for participating, though. I appreciate it. Ya Allah. Awesome. What is a fasiq? What is a fasiq? Yeah. Yeah. So basically, a fasiq is somebody who is kind of openly rebellious. Put it that way, yeah. Hello? Okay. So, it's like 3 parts here. He's saying, all right, don't forget Allah. Well, what's going to happen if we forget you? Well, then Allah says, I'm going to make you forget who you really are. And then once you forget who you really are, then you turn into a fasiq. Then you don't care anymore what your real identity is. You don't care about your source and your origin. You don't care about Allah. So then, Jesus Christ. This is like happy hour for you guys, huh? Then you're just going to start openly disobeying. Then nothing's going to matter. You might have this religion and you might think you love the Ahlul Bayt. And then you're just going to start openly going against the religion of Islam. You won't care anymore. Somebody's going to tell you, your parents are going to say, oh, you know, offer salah. You're like, whatever, I don't care. They're going to tell you, fast in Ramadan. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Nothing will matter at that point. Why? Because your actual identity, who you really are as a Shia Muslim, you don't remember that anymore. And it's because you've originally forgotten about Allah. So our main question, again, going to all this, is why we forgot about Allah. We gave 2 ideas here. One is because we didn't want to feel, out of place. Everybody else around us, they don't care about God. They don't care about Allah. So we feel strange. And the second is that our parents should have given us a strong, tarbiyah, a strong structure and foundation. Most of us didn't really get that as well. Right? Maybe some of you did, but a lot of us don't get that real structure that we need. So this ayah is kind of showing up what exactly happens, right? Kind of like step by step by step. So a lot of people right now, if they're on social media, they'll share and post stuff that is clearly something that a Muslim shouldn't be sharing. But why are they sharing that freely? Because they don't care anymore. Some of them will say that I believe in God, sure, but I don't honestly care about this religion. I don't care about the deen at all. And some of them, at this point, are pretty much done with Islam anyway. They're like, I don't even think God exists anymore. Or if he does exist, he doesn't care what I'm doing. And that's basically that final stage. So I'm sure most of you are not there yet, but Allah's kind of showing you, perhaps in this ayah, that look, if you don't get your identity back, you're going to end up just like everybody else. Everybody else around us who doesn't care at this point. And for them, the only thing that matters is what they want to do now. Right? And that's really a very dangerous thing. So what we want to try to do is make sure we don't fall into these same sort of traps. Okay, so I want to move on to the next part. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, let's go to the next part. Please recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So we shared a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam last night that's attributed to him, where he says, "Afdul al-iman husnul al-iqan." That the best type of iman, like the highest level of iman, is when you have certainty, right? When you have strong certainty in your beliefs. So, does anybody know the Arabic word for belief or beliefs? What would we call that? Aqa'id, right? So that's the plural. What's the singular? What is one belief called? Aqidah, ahsant, right? Alright, so we have aqidah. Now, does anybody know the actual root words? Where does this come from? What word? I heard somebody, aqd. What does aqd mean or aqd mean? Aqd means aqa'id, aqa'id means aqidah. Going in a circle. What does aqd mean? It's a contract, right? So that's one of the meanings that it has right now. But what is the original meaning for aqd? So normally, when do we hear or use the word aqd? When it comes to what? Like what happens and you hear, oh, it's their aqd. Ahsant, right? So normally this contract that they're talking about is a marriage contract, right? Aqdu nikah, right? Marriage, sorry. What's another way that you describe, or at least in the West, how do we describe marriage sometimes? What are different ways, like different phrases that they use for marriage, right? They say they're getting hitched. They say, what else? Wedding. What else? Ahsant, tying the knot. Aqd actually originally means knot, right? And it's basically coming from something that holds something together, or holds something down, or binds something down. So the same over here is a marriage contract is two people are tying themselves together. They're forming a knot between themselves. It's also used in other senses as well. In Surah Al-Falaq, right? Uqud, right? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد. عقد. Uqad is that these sorceresses or witches at that time, they would try to cast spells on the Prophet, and they would have this way, they would tie knots and they would blow on them. And that would be one of their methods they would use to try to curse or cast a negative spell against the Prophet. So the word is used like that in the Quran as well. So the idea here is, look, all of us right now, that's all of us, right? Or that's what I think most of us look like. So right now, so now in our minds, we have all these random beliefs and ideas. Hopefully we have this idea of, like, let's say like Tawheed, maybe. What else do you believe? Maybe you believe 1 + 1 = 2, right? And other random ideas and stuff like that. So when we are like in the outside world right now, right? So you see all these other things around you. We're trying to make sense of all these beliefs that we have and trying to see if they fit with what's going on out there. So a lot of us might say that God is, right, just. Allah is just. But then sometimes you see, I'm going to draw. This person is dead. Right? Let's say an innocent person, they're dead. There's the pool of blood. Sorry, it's a little graphic tonight. So they're dead and they're an innocent person. You might say, I thought you said God is just. Why is all this stuff happening? So what happens is that knot that you had in your mind, the knot that should have been between your beliefs and reality, that starts to loosen up a little bit. Because you're like, wait, I believe that God was just. I was taught that. But then when I look out in the world, I see something, it doesn't seem like God is just. So then you start to untie that knot a little bit. Right? Does anybody else, can you think of any other examples of something you believe, and then when you go out to the real world, it seems like, well, this doesn't match up with what I believe, or it seems strange and it kind of makes you doubt yourself and it doubts Islam, things like that. Anybody think of anything? What do you guys think? Someone being homeless. So what would that make you doubt if you saw that? Yeah. All right, so we have Allah is Ar-Rahman, right? He's Ar-Rahman, like great. Okay, I can't really draw. I'm not going to draw a homeless person, but you have somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, or they're being oppressed or whatever. Like, okay, God, you're Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. There's all this justice and all this mercy and love and compassion. That's what you're supposed to be. But why are all these people suffering? That doesn't make sense either. So that knot becomes a little bit looser too. So every single idea, if we don't have these answers for them, if we don't have that afdhul al-iman, if we don't have that husn al-iqan, we don't have that real strong tied knot and understand why we believe these things and how to explain all the stuff that we see in the world, then the knot gets looser and looser and looser until it's at some point undone, and I erased it, but then you're ending up, you just forget who you are, like, well, this stuff doesn't matter anymore, and then you end up becoming a fasiq at the end of the day too. Because you're like, well, if this doesn't make sense, well, this doesn't make sense, then that doesn't make sense either, and then, what's the point now? I can do whatever I want. And most people don't think about that, but little by little, that's what happens to people. And I've dealt with a lot of Muslims in various communities, of various ages, some even elders who, up to like 40, 50 years old, they were, the people who were the first ones in the masajid. They were helping out, they were volunteering, they were donating, they were doing all of that. They had a strong sense of iman. So if you saw them from the outside, you're like, yeah, this is a mu'min. But they had these creeping doubts in their mind, and they never asked questions. Either it was because, again, we already went through some points, fitting in, or their parents weren't, answering their questions properly, or anybody else that they went to, like an alim, whatever, was like, sit down, shut up, don't ask questions, that kind of thing. So then the knot became looser and looser. But they just tried their best to just keep a smile on their face and keep going and doing everything. But I've seen some elders, 50 years old, they're like, you know what, that's enough. And they just completely like turn into like little kids. They say, you know what, forget all this Islam stuff, I'm going to do whatever I want. Sometimes it happens to kids, usually like maybe high school or in college, they just end up giving up. I've even seen it happen to people who are really old because all of that stuff bottles up. They never had the right outlet and the resources, and they just end up giving up at that end. And it's a really sad thing to see because all that stuff, like, I mean, I've seen some adults who don't even believe that God exists. I'm like, we have, you know, like a dozen proofs for God existing. How could you not believe that? But nobody ever taught them. They never asked the questions. They never did research. So when that knot becomes untied, it's a very dangerous thing. Now, the good thing is, like I said, all these answers are available. Now, this was one of the main reasons I went to the Hawza too, because I had a lot of questions. I was very confused about Islam. And, you know, I started asking ulama all of these things, and they gave me some answers. But a lot of the deeper questions that I had, I was able to get the answers when I went overseas to Qom and studying in the Hawza with all these ulama. And then things became like a lot clearer for me, and it made a lot more sense. So I have never come across a question so far, yarhamukumullah, in my research where there was not an answer. So far, that's not happened to me. Now, it doesn't mean that I got the answer in like 5 minutes. Sometimes I had to read book after book after book and chase around different scholars and put, you know, a bunch of different variables together. But at the end of the day, after some effort, I was still able to get an answer. So if you have those questions, then you're going to have to put in some sort of effort. Okay, please recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go a little bit from aqaid and aqidah to something else. How many of you know what the shahadatain or kalimatayn is? Have you guys heard of it before? Shahadatain or kalimatayn? One person, that's it? Two? Or you're not sure if you... There's every Muslim, at the very least two. Some Shias usually we do three, but there's two phrases that we recite. We're usually taught like the first things when we're kids to recite these, and it shows and helps us show to other people that we are Muslims. It's two Arabic phrases. Yeah. So what do you guys call those two phrases? Yeah. So technically, shahada is a singular. Shahadatain is two, like two shahadas, right? Because it's two phrases: La ilaha illallah and Muhammadur Rasulullah. So it's known as shahada or shahadatain, or it's known as kalimatain, or the two kalimas. So now a question, right? Again, I have to test you guys in your Arabic, right? So what does kalima mean? Okay, so now I've got another question. It means word, but if we're talking about La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that's obviously a lot more than one word, right? Why is it called two words? Yeah, what do you think? It could also mean phrase. Maybe. Okay. It's possible. Yeah, some would say that. Anybody else have any ideas? I'll give you a clue. If you know the original meanings of kalama, then that'll give you an idea. And most people actually, I would guarantee most of you, even those of you who have grown up with the language, don't know what the original meaning of kalima is. But you can try to guess, yeah. So like speech or information or news and something like that. It's close, yeah, very close, good. Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, kalima. Yeah. So we've got obviously a lot of other words that come from this too, right? You have kalam, which usually that's what you use for in more like in terms of speech. I'm talking about fusha, right, in classical. Like takallum, mukallama, stuff like that. But the actual root letters that I'm talking about, when you go back originally to kaf, lam, and mim, there's a very specific meaning that this had. And that's how you get all these other ideas of word, phrase, and speech. All these meanings are derivatives of the original meaning of the this word kalim or kalima. So the only way you would know that is you would have to go back into all these original Arabic dictionaries and things like that. So first I want to give you an analogy. Or not an analogy, but example. All right, you got somebody here. He can be either Hawkeye or Green Arrow, depends on if you like Marvel or DC. He's got his bow and arrow, right? Yeah, that's the best bow and arrow I can draw, sorry. And then obviously over here, you've got your bullseye, right? Okay. So how would you know if this archer is an excellent or expert archer? What do you expect from them? Yeah.
He hits the target frequently.
Yeah, frequently. What would you call, or the best one, obviously, it's somebody who hits it every single time, right?
Consistent.
Yeah, consistently, yeah. So that's what the expectation would be, is that they hit a bullseye every single time. So the original meaning of kalima is exactly that. It's when you have somebody who's able to hit their target every single time. Meaning, whatever they do, they have the exact specific trajectory in mind to hit. So they have a specific intention in mind. I don't know why I did that. I don't know what that means. So they have their niyyah, or their intention. Or you can even say they have a goal in mind, which obviously is over here. Then they have this method, or a path. And they have the skills necessary. When you put all these three things together, then this individual is able to hit their kalima. They can hit their target properly. So, over here, it's, sometimes you have an idea in mind. You have some idea and you want to tell somebody. Like, I want to express to you what color this is. If I say green, every single one of you will know what I'm talking about, right? I have an idea in mind, and when I say green, you'll think of this color. So you'll think of your shirt, or I guess this floor is kind of, yeah, that's greenish, right? Or whatever. So I have something in my mind, and I can transfer it to your mind too by just using a word or a phrase or whatever, and we're all now thinking about the same thing, right? So now how do we go from this to this idea of kalimatain? Kalimatain being, you have two parts, right? You have I'm just going to do the La ilaha illallah part, and then the Muhammad Rasulullah part. So there's two parts over here. So this literally is just saying it's two phrases or two speeches or whatever. But in reality, it's saying it's two things, the two most precise things that any human being could ever say in their whole lives. It's the two things. If you want to hit the target, and the target here is, it's haqq, it's reality, or haqiqa. Oh, that's a really ugly ha. So if that's your goal, if your goal is haqq, it's reality, it's truth, you want to shoot the arrow, then there's two things you need to say, and two things you need to believe, and two things you need to understand. One of them is La ilaha illallah, meaning the only thing that's real is Allah. But how do people normally translate it? There is no God but God, or something like that. That doesn't really mean much. La ilaha illallah means the only thing that's real. The only thing that's real is Allah. Nothing else is real. And then Muhammad Rasulullah, that second part is saying, okay, well, how do we figure out what is real? How do we know what is Allah and all that? Well, that's the other part too. So these two things, these kalimatain, are a way for us to hit our bullseye in reality every time. Remember when I was saying that when we're here and in reality, like the real world is out here, and we're trying to make sense of what that is in our mind, we want to be able to hit a bullseye every single time. Every single thing that we see out here, right? Whether it's, again, we see poverty, people are poor or homeless. Somebody, again, they have, let's say, mental health issues. Somebody has problems in school. Whatever it is, we want to figure out why that's the case. So the whole idea is Islam, or these two ideas, this kalimatain, if it's a part of our ideology, then we're going to hit the bullseye every single time. We're going to understand why that stuff is happening. And that's what a true Muslim is they have that yaqeen, they have that iman in their heart. And when they go look out in the world, everything makes sense to them. There's no confusion for them whatsoever. That's the stage that you and I eventually want to reach. Now, how many of us are actually there? Probably not, right? That's a lot of work that's involved. So there's a lot of things that we need to learn along the way to help us get to that stage. Okay. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So the reason I'm going in this direction is because eventually, especially starting tomorrow, we're going to start talking about the relationship between religion and science. And the reason I'm giving this introduction right now is because a lot of people right now, where some of them have Islam over here, and they look out, and again, they have questions like, okay, Islam, is it explaining that stuff or not? So now other people are saying, well, maybe that doesn't explain it, let's try science. And some think, hey, science is explaining some of these things, but that's going on in the world. Since science is doing a better job, maybe I should prefer science over Islam now. And then all of these things in Islam start coming down and science starts to get raised. So we'll have to start talking about, inshallah, starting tomorrow, is what exactly is science and what exactly is Islam and what are their jobs? What are they trying to explain? How much time do we have left? Okay. You know what? Maybe I think we'll stop right here. Anybody have any questions or comments about anything we did today or from any of the past few nights? No? Yeah. So I went over time the past 2 nights, so I think I'll end earlier tonight. So now, what I want you to think about, a question tomorrow, and I'll at least write it over here right now. I can finally get rid of that. Okay. Let's say you're over here in one room, and then in some other room, there's a fire. Or there might be a fire. Sorry, it's a really ugly fire, but whatever. Yeah, I don't know what the heck that's supposed to be, but so pretend that's a fire, okay? Here, I'll write it down in case you forget. So you're not in the same room. Let's say it's somewhere else. How many different ways can you find out that there's a fire in that room? So think about that, and we'll start with that tomorrow, inshallah. Yeah. So think about that. Try to come up with, what was that? No, it sounded like a Formula One car. Okay. Yeah, or a motorcycle. That's true. Yeah, it did sound like that. So see if you can come up with at least 3, but there should be maybe 4 ways you should come up with. 4 uniquely different ways that you can find out whether or not there's a fire in some room that you're not in. Right? Or even if you end up in the room too. So there's different ways. Yeah, let me put it that way. How can you find out that there actually is a fire there? Right? So think about that, and we'll start with that tomorrow, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.